Today I'm going to give you 10 tips for working on your own project while working in a full-time job. So whether it's a book you're writing or a game you're developing or a short film you're making or anything else like that, how to do it when you're working full-time. Because it's difficult, right? You come home after maybe 9-10 hours of work with commute, maybe it's 11, maybe it's 12 hours. You have chores to do, maybe you have kids, maybe you have a relationship with, your significant other or anything, life is happening, and then you also have to find the time to make this project, and it's really, really hard. And I'm the kind of guy who really likes doing that kind of stuff, doing projects. I love that, and I recommend it. I wrote Workflow, my creative process book. I wrote that while working on the Willoughby's full-time job, the Netflix show. I did some video courses while working on Secret Life of Pets. I created an application called AppSpace while directing the animation on another feature film. So, I did do a lot of things while having a full-time job, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, the full iceberg being all the stuff that I haven't completed, because I have so many projects that I haven't even started or started and abandoned because it's just really hard. So I'm not going to stand here and tell you that this is going to be super easy or anything like that, or that I'm going to give you 10 tips and then with those 10 tips it's going to be all, wine and roses. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take commitment, it's going to take some sacrifice, but it can also be fun. Like, hard is not the opposite of fun, okay? Something can be difficult and challenging, but in a good way. And that's what I want for you. So to that end, the first tip I want to give you, keep the scope small. Keep your work smaller than you think, especially if you haven't done something like that before. Make it way smaller than you think. Like, take your idea, whatever it is, and make it simpler by half. If you think it's going to take you half a year, make a project you think it's going to take you three months. And then look at that project, the 3 months project, and cut it again. And then maybe it'll take the amount of time you thought in the beginning it would take. Okay? People, and I include myself in that. I made that mistake so many times. I'm still making it every time. Even though I know this and I'm trying to simplify, and it's still more work than I think it is. Always. So just really be aware of that. If you have a limited amount of time, make something super simple. It's much more fun to complete something super simple than to abandon something, super complicated and cool in so many ways, but it never gets done. And then it kind of weighs on you. And then going forward through the years, if you accumulate enough of those projects that you never completed, you sort of lose faith in your own ability to create something and to follow through. And that's really dangerous. So just make something that you can be sure you can actually finish. Tip number 2 is to make sure that you have a very clear vision of what it is that you're making. And not only what it is that you're making, but exactly why you're making it. Like, what is the motivation, your motivation? Are you trying to make money? Are you trying to learn something? Is there an idea that sort of lives inside you and you need to get it? Like, what is the reason that is good enough for you to now lose sleep and and sacrifice relationships and fun that you could be having outside, going for a hike, doing fun stuff, going to a party, and instead you're going to sit there and do the project? What is the reason that is good enough for that? That's the why. Also the how. Just kind of sit there for a second and imagine and think about and really delve into the how of it. Like, what exactly is it going to look like? The process, the planning. When are you going to do it? Is it going to be in the morning? Is it going to be in the evening? How is it working with your day? How long do you think it's going to take? So I'm just saying, really try and have a very clear vision of of sort of the whole process, the journey. Okay, just have a vision of the journey. It might not be accurate. It's probably not going to be accurate. But if you have a good vision, it's going to be very helpful down the line. Okay. And then one thing that we all, I think, tend to sort of ignore in that journey is the distribution. I've done that many times. I'm very guilty of that. being very excited about making something, but not really considering how that thing is going to get to people. And I've done projects in the past that I finished and I love them and I think I did a great job, but I didn't have a good vision for the distribution up front. And so when I finished it, I sort of didn't follow through with that. And they don't exist. For all intents and purposes, they do not exist. And it's a crying shame because I love them. They were my babies, and I gave birth to them and then they disappeared. And it's kind of sad, really. These are pains that I really carry with me through life, those projects that were made and gone. So I don't want that to happen to you. So yeah, include the distribution in your vision of how this is going to happen, of the journey. All right? Number 3 is to have a presentation. I think the first thing you need to do out of the gate, once you have the idea and you decide to actually make it happen, is to present it as if you're presenting it to investors, to somebody who's going to put some money in it, right? And that somebody might be you. You're going to put some time in it, and time is a resource. So present it to yourself and make sure that you have the exciting part of it really understood, And it's also a great tool for focus, because if your project is going to, be happening for a while, let's say a year, it's very important to have this presentation in which you define the nugget of what it is that makes this work interesting and unique and worth making, right? And to have that to refer to half a year from now, 9 months from now, very important. Tip number 4 is sort of a continuation of that idea, and that is to make what I call a pre-make, which is kind of a rough sketch of your work. So if it's a book, it could be an outline or a synopsis. If it's a film, it might be an animatic. If it's a game, maybe it's a proof of concept in which you take one small area of the game and you use some placeholder for the animation and for the artwork, and maybe less of the gameplay elements. But you sort of just do something and you give it to people to play, and you play it yourself and you go like, is this really great? Or if it's not, what is it that needs to be adjusted before I go full on to the larger scale? Tip number 5 is to look at the work, identify some blocks that you can define and create milestones, so that instead of, I have to do the whole project right now, it's, I have to do this amount at that time, and then I have to do this amount at that time. So you chunk it down like that. And I already gave you 2 ways of doing that, or 2 milestones to hit. One is the presentation, and the other one is the pre-mix / proof of concept, right? So you already have 2. Now think for your project what it would be. So I'm going to take a book, for example, as a project. So let's say you're writing a book. How would you slice that up? How would you chunk it? You could go, chapter, each month is a chapter. I don't recommend that. Another way would be, I'm going to do my research, let's say, for 2 months, and I'm going to develop the characters. I'm going to develop the locations. I'm going to figure out the plot, and then that would be 2 months, and then another 1 month would be the first draft, and then the rewrite. So you understand what I mean, right? You can do this multiple ways, but you need to find the way that would work for you and define those milestones. Tip number 6 is to do time blocks. It's to work with time blocks. Basically, that's like the Pomodoro technique, if you know that. If not, you can Google it. There are many tools out there and applications you can use for that. But basically, it means you define a chunk of time, not a big one, just like 25 minutes. Usually it's 25 minutes. I like doing 40 minutes, works better with my psychology, but you can choose your own way of doing it. But basically the idea is just define that time and what you're going to do with that time, and just try and do that. The problem with working on something while you're working in a full-time job is that you only have, sometimes you only have an hour or a couple of hours to do something. And it can be hard if the project is really, if it's going to take half a year, it can be hard to feel that you've accomplished something. But if you go like, okay, I have I'm working in this block, it's going to be 40 minutes, I'm going to achieve that. And then you achieve it. Maybe it doesn't take 40 minutes really. Maybe it takes 50 minutes, fine. But you feel that you feel the step that you took. And that's an important thing for your psychology, for your motivation to continue to go forward. Otherwise it can sometimes feel like you're draining the ocean with a spoon, right? It's like, this is never going to end. But when you go like, okay, I'm going to just do this is going to take 40 minutes and I'm just going to complete that step. It creates a sense of accomplishment, and that is very important to keep the motivation going and also to keep yourself organized. Okay? Tip number 7 is I suggest that you make a distinction in your mind between two different types of tasks. The first type is the one that needs focus, that usually it's the creative kind of task where you have to conceptualize something, or you really have to plan, or you really have to come up with ideas, that kind of stuff. The second type is what I call the work type, which is basically, and every project has that. Basically, it's just the stuff that needs to be done. It's not very creative. It's not, super exciting, but you just need to sit down and do the thing, right? The good things about those tasks is that many times they don't require so much brain power, and you can do them when you're a little bit tired, so that could be an end of day sort of task. Whereas the other type, the focus type, maybe that's more of an early morning kind of thing for you, or the other way around. What I'm saying is, once you understand that those are two completely different types of tasks and they require a different kind of brain power, you can sort of plan it in a way that accommodate for what you need for the task you need to do right now. Okay, that's really helpful, especially when you work full-time and life is full of all this other stuff, and you just need to find those specific time slots that would work for the kind of task that you need to do. Okay, right. Tip number 8. Tip number 8 is to have a clear deadline, and if you can make it an external deadline somehow. Like, for example, if you know that let's say you're doing a Christmas themed game. So Christmas is a natural external deadline. If you release it in February, that's not gonna help you a lot, right? That's in the distribution vision we were talking about. Or sometimes you go like, well, I know that I have this amount of time before I know that my life is changing in some kind of way. Maybe you move to a different apartment. Maybe you have a kid. Okay, you go like, okay, on that date, around that date, I'm going to have a kid and I won't be able to do this anymore. So that's my, external deadline. If you have an external deadline, I would say it doubles the chance, even more than doubles maybe, the chance of you actually finishing the project, because deadlines give you a framework, and framework is an important thing for our psychology to actually create focus and to get ourselves out of our own head and to just kind of move forward. Okay, so I really recommend trying to find a natural external deadline somehow. Tip number 9, also super important and super helpful, is to not do it alone. If you can find a way to either do it with other people, with a friend, with a team, that is amazing. It gives you accountability. It takes you out of your own head. It creates a different kind of energy. So helpful. If you have to do it alone for whatever reason, I would still try and find a support group. Maybe it's some Facebook friends or a forum or something, somewhere where people are used to seeing updates from you, once a week or something, and they can react to it, and they can cheer you up, they can maybe give you some feedback. Makes a huge difference, a world of difference. So that's tip number 9. Tip number 10, my final tip, and that may sound obvious, but I still fail to do this. I'm still failing to do it even as we speak. Is do one project at a time. Even if something else feels like there's a great opportunity or a great idea and you want to jump on it, don't. Focus on one project. It's hard enough even if you don't have a full-time job. But if you do have a full-time job, if you're trying to do more than one at the same time, it is going to spread you so thin that you won't get anything done. And you're gonna, in the end, you're probably not going to finish the project or any of the projects because it's just too slow and it's too confusing. So just do one project at a time. And again, keep it small and simple enough that you're done with it in a reasonable amount of time so that you can continue to the second project after that one is completed, right? And that's how you gain confidence in your own ability to finish stuff. Super important. Okay, so we went full circle and now we're back to the scope. This is a good time to summarize what we've talked about. But before I do that, I want to remind you of that webinar I mentioned earlier about capture. And if you remember, capturing is something I talked about in connection to the presentation and the pre-make and the proof of concept. And this is going to really help you. So the first thing, if you don't know anything about capture, if you haven't seen my YouTube series about that, you want to probably go and see that. There's going to be a lot of good information there. And then on July 22nd or 26th, I don't have the exact date yet, I'm going to do a webinar in which we can do some questions and answers, and we can meet each other, and I can answer, whatever you specifically want to know. So that's going to be a fun event. And please write a comment and tell me your preferences, because I'm trying to figure out whether it's better to do Wednesday evening or Sunday afternoonish, early afternoon or something like that. But tell me when is, a convenient time for you between those two dates. So what I suggest that you do right now is click the link in the description and add yourself to the mailing list. And that's how you get the invitation to the webinar. And you'll also get a link to a page in which there's a collection of tips and hacks and stuff that would help you work from home. I did that for the coronavirus situation. But it also has a lot of tips for the stuff we were talking about today, working in blocks and chunking your work and stuff like that. Really helpful information. I want you to have that. You'll get the link once you add yourself to the list. And then another thing you'll get is just every time I upload some video or some content to Workflow, you'll get a notification. You can always unsubscribe very easily. In fact, I want you to unsubscribe. If all you want is just the webinar or just the page I was talking about with the work from home material, do that and unsubscribe. It's fine. I'm okay with that. I really only want people who are engaged with this material and who are interested in it to be on the mailing list. With that out of the way, let me summarize for you the 10 tips that I gave you today for doing a project while having a full-time job. All right, here we go. Tip number 1 is scope. Just limit your scope. Make sure your project is small enough for you to actually finish it. Tip number 2, clear vision of the what and the why and the how and also the distribution. Tip number 3, create a presentation. And I'm actually going to do a video about that in one of the upcoming videos, so stay tuned for that. Tip number 4, capture your project as a pre-make or as a proof of concept. Tip number 5 is project management, to just chunk your work and to create milestones and so on. Tip number 6 is to use time blocks and the Pomodoro technique and everything we talked about in that area. Tip number 7, to make the distinction between the tired/work tasks versus the focused/creative tasks. Tip number 8 is to have a clear deadline, and if it can be an external deadline in some way, that's a huge win. Tip number 9 is to not do it alone, to try and find a team to do it with, or at least a support group of some sort. And finally, tip number 10 is to do one project at a time, and I can't stress how important that is. As usual, if you like what's going on here, if you want to see more workflow content, like and subscribe and share it with a creative friend who might find it useful as well. All right, and I'll see you in the next video and in the webinar. Cheers.